What is the problem with video game movies? The recent release of the new Mortal Kombat adaptation has not been well received. There's been very little to no fanfare. A lot of fans have been disappointed by it, myself included. And it's not been doing the numbers that Warner Brothers was expecting. But where did the film fail? Well, this new Mortal Kombat failed where pretty much all of the other video game adaptations failed. And that's something that's very interesting to discuss because we've been having video game adaptations for 3 decades now, going way back to something like the Super Mario Bros. Film up until the more recent Tomb Raider or Hitman film. We've been getting tons of those. As a gamer myself, I just sit down and think, what would I like to see in a video game movie? And looking back at some of the more successful ones, I would say that among all of them, and there are many and most are straight up garbage, the ones that succeeded the most, in my opinion, are the 2006 Silent Hill film and Warcraft. What made those films compelling and actually enjoyable for someone who's not familiar with them even, it's that they capture the aesthetic but they also capture the mythology, the lore, the appeal of those universes. The Silent Hill film knows that it's all about the trauma, it's all about the grief, it's all about the manifestation of these creatures. Again, this one messes up because it has the nurses, it has Pyramid Head, who do not matter in any way, narratively and thematically speaking. But they're still frightening creatures, they're still effective monsters in a disturbing universe. There's enough gore, there's enough tension to make it a decent horror film, even for people who are not familiar with the universe. The same goes for Warcraft. Duncan Jones clearly loves the video games, and he pays proper respect to them. It's a sprawling epic, a bit too convoluted and focusing a bit too much on character building rather than having an engaging story, but it's far more commendable than other video games adaptations like the recent Mortal Kombat that are all about moving from set piece to set piece without ever slowing down to develop anything interesting. But what kept the Warcraft film from being a true success is that it went way too far with fan service, to the point that it alienated people. And it has another problem that all of those have. Very rarely, the first at least video game movies that come out, they're always about setting up this larger universe. They very seldom just throw people in. We saw that with the Assassin's Creed film, we saw that with Mortal Kombat, Silent Hill even to an extent, the Resident Evil films. It's always about just, oh, let's try to introduce to poor non-gamers how this universe works, and let's introduce new characters that are not present in this original source material to be some sort of avatar for the audience. And that's pandering, that does not work. They keep on misunderstanding what makes the games fun, what makes the games effective. And weirdly enough, one of those that got the closest to the games is the Rampage film with Dwayne Johnson. Because at least, the video games are about scientists that turn into giant monsters just tearing up cities. And that's what they do in the film, ultimately. There's not that much story, there's not that much character, but at least it tried to be fun, it tried to be entertaining, and it worked. But then you get something like the Max Payne film, which the games are character driven, but also filled with action and slow motion, and exciting set pieces and backstabbing and betrayals. And the adaptation with Mark Wahlberg, it has very little action, if any, and it introduces a almost supernatural element with the drug Valkyrie, which is fine, visually I guess, but it's just a slog to get through. It's a grey film, super dark, you can barely make out what's happening, and it's just boring to watch. I do believe that one of the main problems is that many of the people working on these projects, they're not video game fans. And if they are, unfortunately they have studio heads forcing them to make some changes. That happened with Resident Evil, for instance. Paul W.S. Anderson had already directed the first Mortal Kombat film, which was PG-13, was more family friendly, lacked the gore of the games, but at least it was actually about the Mortal Kombat. It did feature the actual tournament, something that the new film completely forgot. But when it came time to make the Resident Evil films, he already had a lot of problems behind the scenes due to multiple scripts being constantly changed, even one by George A. Romero. And what he ended up doing was focus mainly on the scientific element and introducing a new character to use as an avatar for the audience, and she has amnesia and she doesn't know what's happening. But it worked in its own way. There are some cheap elements, of course. It was made back in early 2000s, but it was still an enjoyable ride. And in my opinion, even the rest of the games, though they try to ape some of the visuals and some of the characters from the video game franchise, they're much more fun when they're actually doing their own thing, where they're just distancing themselves from the universe. And I would say that Resident Evil Afterlife and Resident Evil Retribution are legitimately bonkers, fun action films. Something that is completely lacking in other adaptations. The two Hitman films that we got, including Agent 47, they were written by the same guy, and he managed to fuck up twice, 10 years after another. How does that even happen? Why do they even get the same person behind the camera to make these films when they failed first time around? It's baffling, it's baffling. And even then, not only do these video game adaptations lack an understanding of the source material to the point of actually getting why people would want to watch those films and what they would actually see in them, but they're also just not that well made. If you take the Assassin's Creed film, for instance, by Justin Kurzel, that film could have easily been much more enjoyable if you still had the Abstergo, Michael Fassbender is just talking to people here and there scenes, if everything, and by everything I mean like 15 to 20 minutes tops, of the scenes inside the Animus actually were entertaining, actually were well shot, well paced. Instead, they're just literally random set pieces that make no lick of sense, with some cool stunt work here and there, but all of the action is just choppily edited. Some of the stunts are clearly made with green screens, and you ultimately ask yourself, what's the point of making an Assassin's Creed film if you spend most of the time outside of the Animus just not being an assassin? Again, baffling. And talking about video game adaptations, I can't avoid mentioning everyone's favorite filmmaker, Uwe Boll. Someone who's become synonymous with bad video game adaptations. But if there's something that I can commend him, is that I would say he tried sometimes. At least the Far Cry film is okay-ish, it has a decent cast, some of the action isn't horrible, and there is a genuine element of fun, even if it's in the completely wrong, unintended way of just laughing at the films rather than with the films. But at least you get some enjoyment out of those, out of the BloodRayne film, not the Alone in the Dark one, because that's just garbage. With everything else, it's just tiring. It's just absolutely tiring. Every couple of years, especially during the 2010s, we kept on getting new announcements for future video game adaptations. Hey, Prince of Persia one is coming out. We're getting a new Tomb Raider. We're getting Warcraft. We're getting an Angry Birds film. And they just envision them and go, you know what, I can see that working. And then they get good most of the time at least, they get good people behind the camera to direct them. And it's like, okay, they get talented actors to star in them. Fine. And then the final product is just disappointing. And I do blame the studios and the writers for most of those problems, absolutely. But yeah, what is the problem with the game's adaptations? It's just not understanding the source material, not understanding that people want to actually just have fun with these things. They don't need to be self-serious stories that try way too hard to be more profound or deeper about something. The themes should come naturally from the plot and from the action. Don't spend so much time focusing on, I have to capture the exact same visuals, but also I have to introduce the audiences to this new world. Just throw people in, they will get it, just like gamers do, and most gamers are not that smart even to care about narratives to such an extent. I think studios should try and get people who actually care on a deeper level about video games to write them, and then put more effort in pre-production to create more practical set pieces that ultimately will pay off during the editing, when you actually get coherent fight scenes and chases and shootouts instead of the mess that we usually get. There is very little hope for me right now with future video game adaptations, but there's one that I'm looking forward to, which is the Jordan Vogt Roberts adaptation of Metal Gear. That could be really fun, that could be exciting. Some of the artwork looked cool, but after all, it's just artwork. They did cast Oscar Isaac, if I'm not mistaken, as Solid Snake or Big Boss or whatever the story is going to be. I think that could be good. I think it could be a banger. If you haven't seen Kong Skull Island, the director clearly understands how to have fun and how to craft a video gamey narrative in a way that's interesting and exciting. So fingers crossed for that. But as of right now, the 2021 Mortal Kombat just reminded everyone that video game adaptations, just have fun, be a bit more faithful, and just change. But still, guys, those are just my rambling thoughts on the problems about video games and their adaptations. But let me know in the comments below. I'm curious, which are your favorite adaptations, which are your least favorite? Again, I'm a big sucker for the Resident Evil films, even though they're not good adaptations per se, and Silent Hill has a lot of good going for it. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below. But thanks, as always, for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and support us on Patreon, and I will see you in the next video.